All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to talk about some of the crazy news that the Wuthering Waves space has received just over the past couple of hours. And of course, there's going to be the whole goddamn entire version trailer that we're going to have ready for us that's going to give us, things about the story, information about the characters, but we're not going to be focusing on that. What you might see below it is, of course, all of the different types of drip marketing that Kuro Games has done for a bunch of the new limited 5 stars, or who people believe to be 5 stars, releasing in Septimont. And boy, oh boy, is there a lot to look at. And so what I wanted to do today was actually break down all the different characters that you're going to be seeing over here, starting with the first one revealed for Lova. And then from there, talk about the role that they played in the story, who some of their inspirations might be drawn from, and also maybe dive a little bit into how they might relate to some of the existing units on the roster. And so with that, let's just go ahead and get ourselves started with probably one of the most anticipated units we've had in the history of the game. If you're not familiar with who she is, then you probably just have not been paying attention to any of the story that the game has had, because Frolova has obviously played a massive role in version 2.0 as a whole, being like the final boss of Raguna way back when we started out that story. But she's also actually been in the game since 1.0. And boy, oh boy, are we in for a big one with her. Not necessarily sure when she's going to release, but as we're all certain, right? She's been somebody that has been sort of in the background this entire time. We're never really sure what her real intentions or motives are as a member of Fraxidus, and I do believe she's going to be the first antagonist or enemy faction that's going to be released as a playable unit. And, as we all saw in the trailer as well, Scar is going to be another character featured in version 2.4. And so we might be seeing something about him, maybe where his story is going to lead alongside hers, because they do have a bit of a close relationship with each other, as we saw during the 1.0 quests. Next up, we've got another character that, for all intents and purposes, I think threw everybody out of whack when they saw how she was revealed. And that's actually going to be Chisa. This unit is probably one of the most unique vibes we've seen in the game. She almost looks like she doesn't fit in with the aesthetic. Kind of has like this whole sort of urban schoolgirl design going on. We see that the tacit mark is on her arm, and it looks like she's using a saw blade. This literally looks like a ruler. Just something very, very interesting in the form of her weapon. Maybe this means she's like a sword user, maybe she's a broad blade user, but just looking from the colors that we see, I would assume that Frolova is Havoc, especially due to, we all know, the Echo that represents her, right? You just go over in-game, you take a look at Hecate, and yeah, Hecate does Havoc damage. And so maybe this is going to be Frolova's best in slot, and she's also going to use coordinated attacks, and, probably have some synergy with the Empyrene Anthem set in her kit. We're never really going to know, though, until she's actually fully released and her full kit details are out, but that's just a clue from what we already have in-game. Heading on back into Chisa, yeah, what I was mentioning before was that based off the color scheme, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up being a Havoc character as well. Havoc and Spectro seem to be Kuro's favorite elements or favorite attributes overall, and the only reference that I can think of when it comes to her design and how she's been implemented in the game is, of course, a prior boss that's in Punishing Gray Raven. And when I show what we're looking at over here, you might be able to draw some similarities, because this is a boss enemy that was found in one of Punishing Gray Raven's stories. She's actually super popular among the fan base, and you can kind of see where the design is getting very, very, very similar, but the weapon is definitely something where there are some differentiations. Maybe she's gonna do something really neat with the blade where she, pulls a bit of a Dan Jin and then either splits the blade in half and then starts dual wielding to kind of complete the reference that we're seeing over here. But I would just imagine she does give very, very, very heavy Havoc vibes. So that's where I would put my money for her, and she's probably gonna run some sort of new DPS Havoc set because, well, every new character that seems to be releasing that's a DPS like Lupa has their own set. She's got a new Fusion Liberation damage focused one that's going to be coming out in 2.4. So probably not a lot of pre-farming you can do for her if you're thinking about using Havoc Eclipse. But yeah, just something to think about. And I do believe that this post over here is, I think it's at around 67k in JP. So Japan really likes her. Last thing before we move on from her, the tagline for her is Incisor, so scissor. sort of action going on, of the strings of Annihilation. And we all know that Annihilation, does seem kind of Havoc-based, so that's something to keep in mind. For Lova's tagline is going to be the long-awaited performance, and yes, considering she's from 1.0, absolutely. Next up, we got this character, and boy, oh boy, is she somebody that I think kind of threw us all for a loop. She's going to be the devil ever bathed in purifying flames. Right off the rip, that kind of leads me to believe she's going to be fusion, despite the fact that, you know, her entire motif is blue, because we don't actually have like a blue element or a blue attribute in this game other than Glacio. And I mean, maybe the purifying flames will be ice, but we already have an ice pistol user, as we're seeing over here. So the vibes for me is that she's either going to be Spectro, because we have Zani with like her flames during her liberation, or she's just going to be fusion and then shoot out blue fire. And as we all know, blue fire is pretty neat. So the character over here is going to be Galba. Bit of an interesting name, and I would just say overall when it comes to inspiration, she does give me Devil May Cry sort of vibes. So maybe she's going to be like an actual pistol user that'll do like long attack strings, that sort of stuff. Not necessarily like Carlotta, whose gameplay is a lot more focused on, you know, like aerial movement, big nukes, that sort of stuff. I would love to see if she's almost a bit like, this might seem a little odd, a little bit like Billy from Zenless Zone Zero in terms of like how her kit works. A lot of like fast movement, you know, like shooting around in a big area, that sort of stuff. And we all know that pistol users, nobody uses just one in actual combat. They all end up dual wielding in one way or another. And I feel like she really does give me like those stylish sort of vibes we might be seeing from like the Devil May Cry franchise. And we all know that Kuro Games has, ladies and gentlemen, collaborated with that company and that genre in their latest game, Punishing Grey Raven. So maybe some additional influence is going to be taken from there and imported to Wuthering Waves. But that's just going to be my take. Fusion, Blue Fire, DMC5-like playstyle. If I'm wrong, you can try to sue me. The next character that we have on the list is actually the one that I am anticipating the most, because his design and perhaps his lore references are, in all honesty, really, really, really cool. And it fits an amazing archetype. And that's going to be the Long Wayfaring Swordsman, Chuyon, however you pronounce it. And this guy just looks like an absolute badass. I'm going to be real with you. He's got like the whole like ponytail thing going on, the black and white hair. I assume this is the sword that he's going to be using. It's got some sort of like either attachment on the side, like some sort of bamboo shoot. Who knows how this is actually going to be used in combat. But yeah, I mean, this is, to me, one of the coolest looking units we've had added to the roster. And just from like how he looks, he's like a combination of like Jing Yuan from Honkai Star Rail, but then also, really clearly, right, Yasuo from League of Legends. And this is, Yasuo over here is probably one of the most popular champions or playable units in League of Legends. And the vibes here are just absolutely, hopefully you can kind of see where the design is getting a little bit similar over here. And when you look at this unit's name, Chuyon, I mean, let's be honest here, guys. This is probably our first Jinzhou character that we're going to have added to the roster in a very, very, very long time. And so that means that over the course of Septimont, we're probably going to have some sort of journey, some sort of adventure back to Jinzhou. We get to finally, you know, maybe talk about what we've been doing with Yang Yang a little bit. And I do believe that this character is going to play some sort of role. You might notice from the color scheme that we have going on, it's pretty clear that this guy might actually be Arrow. And another thing that leads us into believing that he might be Arrow is actually how similar he looks to another unit on the roster. Yeah, you guys remember her? You remember John Shin? You remember this gal? Yeah, I think you might have forgotten her like a lot of other people have. And one thing for certain is that with the whole like black and white color scheme, the fact that John Shin has a master, you know, that's never been revealed by name, but has been talked about somewhat frequently by her in the story, I think that this might be the dude. I do believe that this might be the master of John Shin, and who kind of like taught her some of like her monk techniques, all of that stuff. So if he's got stuff, you know, that makes him like an on-field DPS, something akin to like counters like what Zani has, and, you know, wind blades like Yasuo, who, I mean, let's just take a look at what this guy does. He like stabs forward with his sword, he builds charges, and then he throws a tornado at his enemies, and then also summons like a wind wall, that sort of stuff. And so, to me, that's kind of like where it seems to be going. I would love if he's released as, you know, not to necessarily power creep Gian or Cartithia, maybe a bit more of like a quick swap heavy sort of DPS that maybe deals like resonance skill damage, just to ensure that he's not stepping on the toes of a lot of other units. Maybe he can have like some sort of enablement through arrow erosion as well to give like, you know, Kachona, who, let's be honest here, she's probably only going to work with Cartithia particularly well. Give her a little bit more flexibility in some of her teams. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of potential, like maybe a quick swap team where he works with Chikona or pretty much any other, you know, maybe arrow character in the game. Give Alto a bit of room to shine. But yeah, I mean, his design looks super cool. He's probably the one that I am anticipating the most, and I can't do anything except look forward to his release. And lastly, we've got 2 characters that are actually based off of the teasers that we saw. All of these prior units, except for Frolova, have had nothing to do with the teasers that we saw before, right? The sun, the moon, all of that stuff. But over here, we've got our first one that focuses on the moon, and this was going to be Yuno. And boy, oh boy, is this design a little bit crazy. Yeah, this design is probably going to get some people canceled on Twitter for talking about it, but I will say it's a pretty spicy one. And as you can see over here, her tagline is the moon arrow that anchors the shifts of fate. And it's really, really interesting, the parallels that this unit has, right? She's got the whole like twin tail motif going on, the clothing, or really lack of clothing, that's occurring over here, and the idea that there's an arrow that might be what she's actually using in combat, so some sort of like bow projectile action going on. And if you've been familiar with the Fate franchise, which is collabing with Honkai Star Rail, then you probably know about this unit, Ishtar. And she kind of is, you know, the similarities that we're seeing over here, they're a little bit crazy. And another similarity that these 2 units have, assuming that her tagline is correct, is that Ishtar kind of fights by using a gigantic bow. In combat. It doesn't necessarily look like a bow, but it's got, you know, it shoots projectiles, and who knows? That might be very similar to the sort of contraption that we see Yuno over here lugging around. That thing is gigantic, and so is whatever the fuck that is. So the vibes, the parallels to me are pretty apparent and pretty clear. We're just gonna have to see, you know, what a further kit detail is. And so when it comes to the motif over here with, you know, her being all blue, and the only time we've seen blue in a kit actually being related to Havoc, like with Cantarella or Glacio, I mean, I don't know if Glacio is what I would necessarily go for when it comes to her design. I was thinking either something related to Havoc would maybe make more sense. You know, the moon being like, you know, at night, darkness, Havoc, that sort of vibe going on. But that would make this a lot of Havoc characters that they would have potentially been teasing. So for her, I've got no idea. I've got no clue. It doesn't seem to fit in line with the drip marketing unless Kuro wants to release like 17 Havoc characters this version. We're just gonna have to see maybe after some conversations with her in 2.4, because she is featured in the main story quest, what she's actually going to do. And last but not least, we have Augusta, the undying sun eternally ablaze. And yeah, this unit, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe is what many consider Mavuika, if her design was not bad. Over here, you have like the Archon of like a war-torn region, looking like she just came out of a, you know, looking like she's wearing a gimp suit. And while Augusta over here, on the other hand, actually looks like a leader of a region. And it's pretty clear from the trailer that we saw, Augusta kind of like takes center stage. She represents the sun. She's got that gigantic greatsword that she's holding over here to the side. She is, you know, like the leader of Septimont, at least from everything that we've been seeing. And I mean, based off of that, right, we're gonna have to assume she's either Fusion or Spectro due to all of those sun motifs. If she does end up being some sort of other different element or some sort of other different attribute, then, you know, we might as well just go ahead and throw in the towel when it comes to color schemes and kits, because everything over here, you know, Mavuika design, if her design was good, everything over here is screaming to me Spectro or Fusion. But one thing for certain is that we already do have a lot, maybe too many Spectral characters, and also a lot of potential fusion ones as well, just from the drip lineup. And so, you know, it could potentially be like, I mean, if she's Glacio, God forbid they ever do that. That would be one of the most confusing things ever. She might be one of the other attributes, like Electra or something moving forward. But we'll just have to see. This is a lot of early drip marketing that these devs are doing, which is really similar to what they did for the release of 2.0 and Renacita. And I've got to say, the level of hype that these devs have been able to generate is absolutely insane. Version 2.4 as a whole is probably going to be, and I've already said it before, one of the best, if not the best update that this game has ever had. And I am all here for it. Let me know what you all think. Peace.